Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, a podcast about role-playing games and the weird, wonderful people behind them. Hello, wonderful weirdos, this is Diogo Nogueira. Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, and today's guest is gonna be Jeremy Pillipow, or you might know him also as Black Magic Craft from a YouTube channel for crafting terrain, 3D accessories for your games and many other things. It's a very cool channel, you can learn a lot from it. I just watched a few videos and was very inspired to create and go do something. So check out the show notes to see the channel and learn a little bit. But before we talk more about Jeremy, I'm gonna remind you to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Leave us a review telling what you think about the show, what we can improve, what is good, what is bad, and also support the show. Share it with your friends, with your gaming group, with your neighbors, with your pets, I don't know. And if you have any coins left from your last adventure, check out the show notes too to see how you can pay us a coffee at Ko-Fi or buy one of my games to support the show and keep this thing going. And well, in this chat was very inspiring to talk a lot about crafting, you know. We talk about do-it-yourself culture, talk about making mistakes and how important it is to learn how to accept them and learn from them and go from that. And yeah, that's the only way you can really learn. We talk about making do with what you have, which is super important. We won't always have the perfect materials, but we have to make do with what we have. We talk about his horror passion, his VHS collections, the importance of collecting things, how he's himself like an archiver of things, and we talk about the importance of the analytic eye too for a game designer, for a creator, for a crafter. And it was a really inspiring show. It has a lot of lessons for the way he approaches his work, so I hope you get inspired by it. I was very much. So let's get weird with Jeremy Pillipow, or Black Magic Craft. Hi Jeremy, welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People. It's great to have you here. Listen, wonderful weirdos have pointed me to you. I looked through your work. It's really fantastic work, the way you create, the way you approach your craft, and the way you brought that to create your own game too. It's really inspiring. So how are you, Jeremy? How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's a beautiful day here in Winnipeg, Canada, and I finished my work for the week early, so I'm now just gonna sit down and chat. So that's all right. Could be worse, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll finish
Yeah,
the work early. Sometimes I feel like work's never finished, right?
yeah,
So
exactly. Well, work
yeah,
for the day. The work
yeah,
is
yeah,
never
yeah,
done, right?
yeah. That's great. So you have uh, you set your own goals for each day, like, oh, today I'm gonna do this, and you get into it like in the first thing in the morning, or
Yeah,
how is
like
your daily routine? Since you brought that up, I usually ask this after a few questions, but like how do you plan your work day?
well, I mean, I guess the work day isn't the first part of the planning. My general planning and scheduling goes on more like a week to week basis.
Mm,
Mostly because my main operation is YouTube, and I'm generally trying to put out a video every week, which means I have about a week to do it along with my other tasks.
mm-hmm.
So there's the broader deadlines of the week, and I'll usually break those down, day by day. And as the week gets closer to the end, my list gets shorter. Hopefully, usually.
Yeah,
And there's always, those tasks that like carry over to the next week and the next week because you don't get them done. And when you get sick of writing them on the daily to-do list, you finally try to bang them out, right? And
yeah.
get them over gone with. So I'm a big fan of to-do lists and
Well, yeah,
crossing them out.
nice. Yeah, I try to do them. Sometimes I forget, but I always come back to them, and they really help. And but I have a hard time, breaking down like big goals to. They seem like they're never finished. I'm working on them, and they
Yeah.
never finish. So I used to do like bullet points, like it's a bullet point with the task, and I get it done. Cross an X. If I don't get it, go to the next day. I do like a like an arrow, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but then I have like the big to-do list, like the big things that are not day by day, and I mark progress by then, like doing small boxes, like line by line until you make a box. So see, even though it's not finished, I'm marking there that I'm working on it, so it kind of helps me see that
Yeah.
progress is being made.
I'll tend to
Something
take
like this.
if I feel like I'm not making progress or I need some motivation to help, get things done. I'll generally take like one list item that's larger and break it down into a
Yeah, yeah,
smaller sub list, and then it starts to feel easy to cross some of those out. And I
yeah,
usually, not always, but a lot of the time, I will end my proper workday. I mean, as a like running a small business, self-employed creator, whatever, the
yeah,
workday never really ends, right? Because it's always kind of
yeah.
a
But you have to
fluid.
live too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fluid thing. But when I officially try to call it done, I'll try to end the day by writing out a list for the next morning.
Wow.
And that's
Nice.
that's more just so I don't forget things. I always have this fear that I'll forget important tasks or something, and yeah,
For
and it kind
sure.
of gives me some perspective and takes a bit of the stress off, because sometimes you think you have more on your plate than you do. When you break it out down, it's manageable. So
Yeah, that's also true. I was during an anxious phase, like just seeing mails would paralyze me. I would not answer mails,
hmm
and one of the advice was, look at the email, and if it's complex, you set us, go in your calendar and set a time. Oh, I will answer this email
yeah.
at this time, because sometimes you get nervous. It's something simple. You can say just, oh yes, no, or okay, or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the
Jeremy,
emails, I'm not. Hey, yeah, go ahead.
oh sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the emails are the one task that I'm not that great at. I tend to just leave them as unread after reading them, so I come back to them later, and sometimes they sit for far too long.
Yeah,
Even though
yeah,
it
I
should
have
be
the
an
same
easy
problem.
task to just one line, but
Yeah. Jeremy, for the wonderful weirdos out there that are listening to us and maybe not know who you are, what Black Magic Craft is, could you, in your words, instead of me reading a bio,
yeah.
say who Jeremy Pillow is, what is that you do, and if you can, share maybe a small word detail about yourself, maybe the way you prepare your coffee in the morning, the way you choose your clothes, or anything particularly weird that
Okay.
someone maybe have noticed about you.
So my name's Jeremy. I am a content creator from Canada. Most people would know me as Black Magic Craft, which is a YouTube channel that I've been running for about 10 years now, and its
Wow.
primary focus is on making miniatures and miniature related things for tabletop games. It's not exclusively all that. I do stuff like dioramas. I'll do some other arts when when I want to, but it's primarily focused on gaming. And it started out as a very user friendly. I was a beginner and just getting into it, and I kind of shared my journey, and that way I was able to appeal to an audience of people who didn't have a lot of experience or skill or money making stuff for gaming. Now, 10 years later, I mean, I can't say I'm a beginner anymore. And obviously that affects the kind of content I make. But that is always an underlying aspect of it, is approachability. Recently, I wrote and released my own miniature skirmish game called Idols of Torment, which was my biggest creative undertaking as Black Magic Craft so far. That's out now. And something about me, you said coffee. Well,
Well, maybe
yeah.
it's something weird
Okay.
about you. Maybe the
Okay.
way you. I always wear
Yeah. Yeah.
hats or I
So,
don't
so,
know, anything like this.
so you mentioned clothing. I'm one of those people that I like to find a t-shirt that fits a certain way, and then I buy a dozen of that t-shirt, and I wear the same
The
t-shirt every
same. Oh
single
yeah.
day, because I don't like thinking about clothing. I'd rather think about
Yeah.
creating things. I guess like another interesting thing about me is that I am a very, very dedicated and avid collector of dead media, specifically VHS, Betamax, Laserdisc, and others. And I would arguably have one of the biggest and most extensive horror VHS collections in the country. I would think so. That's when I get
Wow.
out of the studio and the game related stuff. That's what I use
Just
to,
just so
like
we
refresh
can
myself.
imagine how big the room is, but how big is the VHS? Like how many VHS? Do you have
I
a number or
You know what?
anything?
I don't even know what the number is. Like thousands though. Like it's
Wow.
a bedroom that is floor to ceiling, like VHS tapes into closets everywhere, and then overflow into basements and storage. Now, the thing is, more isn't always the important thing. There was a lot of VHS tapes made, but more importantly, I have a pretty good catalog of very rare stuff.
Wow.
There's there's a wide range of uh, value in VHS tapes, so you
Yeah.
could fill a house with a million of them, and it's a worthless collection. But I have,
Any particular ones that like your like your hearken stone of your collection, like this?
yeah, I don't know that the average person would necessarily know what it is though, because one of the
Yeah.
things
Well.
with horror VHS is that obviously the more rare it is, the more valuable and hard it is to get. And if something's
Mm-hmm.
rare, it's probably unknown. Like blockbuster movies were made in the millions. So, but I do have like one that took me years to get, and I finally got it. It's a movie called Microwave Massacre, and all versions of that are incredibly valuable and hard to get. But the one I found is the hardest, which has a gimmick box with a microwave on the cover, and you press the button, and there's little electronics on it that beep and make lights and stuff, which obviously 30 some years
Very
later
nice.
rarely survive. Yeah, so that's. But yeah, I have many. I could talk about that all day here, which is not what we're here for.
Well, I mean, we are here for talking about you and the stuff that you're interested about because I think all of this kind of uh, bleeds into our craft, into our
Yeah,
work, and the thing you talked about, you shared your learning, you shared your process, which is something fantastic that I like to do when I'm learning. When I begin making my game, I begin sharing and things that I'm learning, always doing the same thing, and I think that's very important because it is not only you make people interested in what you're doing, but you also learn with them too because
yeah,
when you learn what you're sharing what you're learning, people will point you to certain things they think you would find useful that maybe you could use, maybe you could
mhm,
learn. So I think you'll grow better by doing that, and you also encourage people to do the same, and
yeah,
everybody grows in this way. I think it's very healthy. You said like you're not a beginner anymore, but you also recently bought the printing art printing stuff that you made some prints and you're
yeah,
selling on your website, right? So that was kind of something new that you were
yeah.
doing, right?
So I'm a beginner at that, and I think it's important. I guess there's two ways you can approach any art form or task or skill, and you could try to become really the best you can be at one particular thing. you know uh 10,000 hours to become a master,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be. I don't personally find that very interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
really like discovering new things and being a beginner, and then getting pretty good at it and getting to a point where I'm capable of doing it, and then moving on to the next thing. I really consider myself a jack of all trades, and in the way that that name is, or that phrase is meant to be, which is like sometimes a jack of all trades, a master of none is better than a master of one. So I really enjoy that thrill of starting from the bottom and working my way up, and sharing that with other people makes it a little bit more relatable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. Like I studied a lot of stuff too. Like I used to watch a lot of Netflix while I was crafting something, and now I'm watching sometimes master class to learn a new thing, learn
Mhm.
about comedy, learn about writing, and curiosity. I think it's very related to artists, and not only the master of one thing. I also think that this curiosity, this spirit of learning other things to a point will help them in some way,
Mhm.
because I love that phrase, like from one thing learn a thousand things. So there's always something you learn as you like doing the sprint thing, or studying comedy, or studying something else that you can, oh, wait a minute, I
Yeah.
can apply the spirit of this teaching to how I make miniatures, to how I write games, to
Absolutely.
how I do illustrations. So when you're doing these explorations recently, this stuff that you are curious about, uh, has anything stood out to you as something you could maybe apply to your craft in making miniatures, making settings, scenarios, and stuff like this?
I mean, that's always happening, but generally it's kind of abstract. I think that when you're discovering new art forms and working your way through them, it's not even necessarily that you find a particular technique or material that you can apply to a different task. Sometimes it simply just makes you think about things differently from a different perspective, which is just refreshing and lets you come back to an old familiar task with kind of a new mindset, which that can then breed exciting new things. But yeah, there's always going to be, when you're exploring something, you'll find usually like a tool or a technique or something that you go, wow, like I would never have played with this, but now that I have, I could probably use it to do this thing over here. And that's always really fun.
Yes, for sure. During your experiment with the printing making there, did you find anything that you thought maybe you could apply to your craft with your miniatures and settings and 3D models you make?
Oh yeah, I mean there's definitely potential there for taking the stuff I learned from block printing and applying it to terrain. The idea of mass producing something that is still unique. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one issue in, say, terrain making, or model dioramas, whatever, is that if you want to make something that's really handmade and unique and feels personal, usually that means having to do something over and over and over again, which is really inefficient, takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So
Yeah.
the opposite end of that is like using pre-made things or technology to make it repeatable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I could make 100 dungeon tiles by hand, and they're all really like slightly different and have a kind of human element to them. And that would take a really long time. Or I could just design one or two in 3D software and 3D print them. And but then you kind of lose some of that human element with what you gain in efficiency.
Yeah.
But with printmaking, it's kind of a nice in between where you draw one thing and you have a master copy that you're copying, but that master is still handmade. And then every time you print with it, despite it being a one master print, the ink comes out different every time because it's not
Yeah.
perfect. You have, like, if you compare a run of 10 prints, they all have little different artifacts or errors or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think you could apply that to something like, um, making dungeon tiles or whatever. You could make a battle mat for a tabletop game using a stamp that you hand carved, right? Or people like
Mm-hmm.
using a roller with a pattern on it that you've made, spend a lot of time carving once, but then you can repeat it over and over again, but with those slight imperfections, keeping it to still feel like it's human touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good idea and great point, and even makes now think how could I apply that maybe RPGs in doing like unlimited runs of things or character
Hmm.
sheets that you could print or yeah, that's fantastic. And Jeremy, the show here is called Word Games and Weirder People, and we kind of have this positive view of the world, like the world is the new wonderful.
Yeah.
And do you identify yourself with the weirds? Do you seek the weirds in your work and in life in general?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been a weirdo since I was a little kid. I've always been an outsider and interested in strange things that weren't necessarily the most popular. I think maybe now, in my you know mid-age adulthood, and finding communities like the tabletop community, if anything, maybe now I'm the most normal I've ever been because I found enough other weirdos interested in the same thing to no longer be weird. Like, I don't know. I think I think weirdness is a dying trait, to be honest. I think the world and people are becoming much more accepting of strange things and exploring different ideas and interests. So, but yeah, I'm a weirdo for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons for the show too. I think previously, we all felt, society felt the need to always fit into a box, so everybody should be normal and the
Mhm.
same and act the same. And it's still a lot. There's still a lot of this, right?
Yeah.
But we're beginning to be more acceptable of being different, for being who we are. Not only accepting us as we're and ourselves, but also others, because we can only accept others, we can accept ourselves. So I think the word thing as a positive thing is also take control of that label too,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. And would you try defining what is weird for you?
Like, do you mean what is weird, what I find weird, or what I believe
Well,
people
how
would
would you
think is weird?
define weird? Like, how would you define weird for
I don't
you?
know, because it depends what perspective you're taking, right? Like what I think
Yours.
okay, what I think is weird versus, some, you know, granny walking down the street. She's gonna think something else is weird as
Yeah.
weird to
We
me.
don't
But
care about her. We
yeah,
care about you, man.
okay. Well, what do I think is weird? I just think uh in the non-positive way. Like I think that the label that people might apply to weirdos is a positive thing, and it shows um personal kind of growth and being interested in stuff. But what I actually think is weird, what I would call a weird person, is someone who is very has very little experience in the world and is afraid to try different things and likes things to always be the same. To me, that is as weird as it gets. Somebody who isn't going to go out and try new food and new restaurants or strange forms of music or whatever it may be. To me, that's true weirdness. And so I guess you could say like the normies are the weird ones to me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. And and what about this strange hobby that you have, like making miniatures and playing these fantasy games? Do you find it a weird thing?
You know
And
what?
and if you do, what would you be your would you do or not? What is your favorite part of that this hobby?
I mean, first of all, I think that miniatures and games are not really that unusual in this day and age. They've become, I don't want to say mainstream. Your average person doesn't play like a tabletop RPG or Warhammer or whatever. But I think now the average person knows what it is, and if they hear it, they're not confused or put off by it. So I no longer think that it is that strange. But my favorite thing about it is just that miniatures and gaming, they allow for so much creative exploration, no matter what your skill level or personal type of art form is. Someone can, if someone's an excellent artist, they can draw worlds and characters. If they're terrible at you know representational art, maybe they write stories or world build, or maybe they're bad at that, but they're a good storyteller, and they can run games for people that where they get to use their skill of just entertainment, or maybe they're like, there's even whatever your skill set might be, there's a place to apply it within this hobby, and which I think makes it really welcoming to all sorts of different people. Everyone can find a kind of home within tabletop to explore and create.
Yeah, true. And even as you play, right, there's different kinds of play styles. You can be
Mhm.
very active. You can role play a lot. You can be very tactical. You can be just about flower and hanging out with friends. It's a hobby that is very welcome to different play styles, right?
Yeah,
And yeah, different from, if you're gonna play soccer, you gotta, play, like you have a be there and something. I don't know.
yeah.
It's a little bit different. Awesome. And talking about the creative process, as you were saying, like the different people have spaces to do their thing in different ways. And about the thing that you do you have a creative process or creative ritual that helps you, get into the mood when you sit down to do your work? Like you put some coffee, some working shoes, or some music, anything like this?
I mean, I do have to put on my working shoes, which are my Crocs, so my feet and my back doesn't hurt in the studio. As weird and embarrassing as those shoes may be, they're part of the process. For me, though, it's my biggest process is simply starting things. It's hard to have ideas. It's hard to be inspired all the time on demand. So I will try to just start making things. I'll grab some material and just start cutting it up, holding pieces together, grab a mini, chop it up, glue it together, put some paint on it. And I kind of let that process lead me down a path. Um, and that's kind of how I find things to do is, is just
By
by
doing it,
starting.
yeah.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
without a plan. I'm a big advocate for creating things without a lot of decisions ahead of time, because I think like one of the most dangerous things for a creative person is decision paralysis. Overthinking things. Oh, what if I this? I should do that. No, just do something. And you
Hmm.
know what? If it doesn't work out, I don't know, just do it again
Yeah.
or rip it off, redo it. Like, don't worry about it. A a started piece of art is better than no piece of art, and a finished piece of bad art is better than an unfinished piece of good art. Like it
Oh yeah.
just do it. That go through the motions until it's done, and you'll
That's
get something good in the end eventually.
That's an excellent philosophy, and a lot of wisdom to it. There's a lot of thing there. And have you always thought this way? Have you always had these ideas, or who taught you how to approach art and crafts in this way, or was it just a hard and long process
Um,
of dealing with all the difficulties of
I
making
think
art?
because I've been involved and interested in different art forms my whole life. And I've always been sort of limited by my natural ability or my willingness to practice things. So I've never been able to get really good at anything up to, at a certain point in my life. But there was something that changed for me, which was before doing YouTube, my career was in construction, in carpentry. I'm a carpenter by trade, trained, and I worked in the renovation industry. I did lots of renovations on houses and restaurants for about 10 years. And there are always incredibly tight deadlines and a lot of pressure to finish tasks. And there's also a expectation of quality, but you don't have time to him and haw about things. You have to just get stuff done. Because if you're not getting stuff done, you're not making, yourself or your company money, and you're going to be out of work real soon. So I think just operating in that environment for, several years forced me to not think about a task too much, but instead jump in head first and just get stuff done. Because there's this kind of unspoken rule in a lot of construction that I don't know if a lot of people know about, and it applies really well to hobby stuff and other art forms, which is if you can spend all your time worrying about making a mistake or getting something wrong, and you're never going to get anything done. So if I have 10 tasks to do, 10 projects to make or build, if I overthink them until I get it perfectly right, planned out, know exactly what I'm doing, I'll get one or two of them done. But if I just jump head first into it, I'm going to get them all done. And I might make some mistakes along the way, but in general, it's going to be quicker to fix the odd mistakes that pop out from just winging it and just doing it than the time it would have taken to plan to do it right. So it's kind of just getting a bit of bravery to jump in and just do something, because yeah, you'll get so much done that you'll have time to spare to fix the things that don't turn out right, rather than spending all your time worrying and thinking about how do I do this. Oh, I'm not good enough to do this. They say the what is it? That perfection is the enemy of good, right?
Yeah.
And I really firmly believe that in everything in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very wise, and for me, it took a long time to get into that point to have this feeling of done is better than perfect,
Yeah.
and then just not worrying so much, and it's a great thing that you have this, you learn this and you approach this to your crafts. It's a very helpful way, and when you teach your stuff in at your channel, you're passing these values tools, which is fantastic for I think all kinds of crafts.
Yeah, and I think that like because I have this approach and also this platform where I'm, expected to put out content on, what that means for me personally is that there's no hiding the mistakes. Like I have to keep making things, and I do it through this process, which means things sometimes go badly and there's mistakes. And I've always shown that in my work. I think that's like a
Mm-hmm.
defining feature of my channel and my content. And I think that's an important thing. I think that's lost a lot of the time when you see, tutorials or whatever on social media. Things are often framed as perfect, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really discouraging because that's not real life. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
I love that
I
you showed mistakes. Oh, this
yeah,
wasn't so good, so I'm gonna try this.
and
It's excellent.
it's important to give people confidence. One, to go like, hey, look, everybody makes mistakes. It's not a big deal. Um, and more so that those mistakes and correcting those mistakes or
It's very
figuring out how you
rewarding.
can pivot, that's how you learn. You don't get good
Yeah,
at you don't learn by doing things well. Like,
yeah,
if you just have a natural ability for something, and you never kind of push yourself beyond your comfort zone of natural ability, you're gonna stay in the same spot all the time. It's the screw ups that you learn everything from.
exactly. Yeah. And another thing that you talked about is that you just sit down and start working with material, and then it leads you somewhere. And I had an art teacher that would say, like, there is creativity in the hands, there is ideas on the muscles.
Mhm.
Because sometimes we're, drawing blanks, just sit down and sit writing something or drawing something, and then and the act of start doing it will spark some idea. His sentence: there is ideas and
And
creativity
yeah,
in your hands, not
and
only
I
in your head.
and I believe that there is like there's we as humans have muscle memory and association to things. So
Hmm.
you might not have a creative idea or whatever, but once you start just getting in that process, um, whatever the art form is, like when you start smelling the materials, hearing the sounds of things cutting or ripping or handling different tools, that somewhere subconsciously is going to spark a synapse connection in your brain to a time when you did something creative, and it's going to open up those pathways that might have been closed earlier in the
Oh
day
yeah,
because your brain was too fried from scrolling social media all day or worrying about work or whatever.
yeah.
It's you got to make those mental connections, and you can't control those. You can't just tell your brain to do that, but
Hmm.
you can trick your brain into it. It's just like, people say, "Oh, I can't sleep. I have a hard time sleeping." It's like, well,
Oh yeah.
what did you do? Like, did you stare at your phone and scroll on stuff or watch Netflix for hours and then try to sleep and you couldn't? Or did you put your mind in a state to be able to sleep? Did you get
Hmm.
away from a screen? Did you turn the lights down? Like, did you subconsciously trick your brain into saying it's time to sleep? Because then your
Yeah.
brain
Are you
takes over.
present, or you're
Yeah,
just thinking about
yeah,
the
because
past or the future? And
like sleep therapists will always tell you that that's the trick to getting a good night's sleep is just tricking your brain to go into sleep mode. You have to put it in that spot, and it'll do the rest. And I think it's the same thing as for creativity. It's like
hmm.
if you're in a really uncreative space, you're not going to be able to flip a switch and just be creative. But when you start doing stuff and you start doing things, or just being around other people doing things, if that's possible, uh, that's going to trick your brain into start making those connections and go down that path. And it's going to be a lot easier to create things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree fully. I have this, there's techniques you can use to help you get into the moods. That's why these creative rituals are about, right? Because
Mhm.
they 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 help you get there. They remember something, I guess.
Exactly.
Some people have uh musics they sing or
Certain
something,
music,
yeah,
yeah, like
invocation of the muse and stuff like this. I use in the beginning of the year I was singing this song a lot. I have not been singing them so much, but when I'm on the streets thinking about
yeah,
creativity, I listen to it. So
yeah, and I think
it
it's
helps me
important.
in a way.
It's important to recognize when you come across those kind of things and welcome them and use them, and also maybe recognize when they start to no longer work.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, like
and you
some things,
change something
and
else,
you
right?
change it, and don't be averse to that change, right?
Absolutely. Jeremy, do we identify? No, of course, as creators, we are always drawing ideas and inspirations for all kinds of experiences we have every day. But sometimes we also have this particularly field or area of life where we see we're constantly drawing from. For example, I myself I draw a lot from the culture and media that I consumed as a kid. It was
Hmm.
kind of my refuge from this weird world for me. And do you have anything like this for you? Maybe a period of time, or maybe
Oh yeah. I mean,
a
for
style
me,
of art.
I'm uh, I'm a big sucker for nostalgia, and I mean that's why I have a huge VHS collection because being a kid in the video store and seeing these amazing hand painted, just fantastical movie covers that, I would later realize when taking the movie home had nothing to do with the movie, but it just sold a theme and a vibe so well. Just like, behind me here, I have all the like the vintage
Mm-hmm.
D&D like manuals and stuff.
Yeah.
And they have that same kind of exciting, inviting, like, look at me, uh,
You
kind of
you
tone
mentioned
to
the
them.
human touch also too,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
painting,
And I
all of
think
this
that,
stuff.
I'm a big fan of movies, horror in particular, and that alone is a big influence on me. But something that happened to movies, all movies, but genre movies in particular, and all sorts of art form is that in the late '90s, the 2000s, there was a shift in the way art and stuff was manufactured and put out to the world. And I mean stuff like movies and music and literature. Things became very, very homogenized and simple. It's like we moved away from painted covers. If you look at the
Mm-hmm.
70s, 80s, and 90s, you could pick up any fantasy, sci-fi, horror novel, and it had an amazing illustrative cover with like that someone took their time to paint and imagine this world. If you look at movie
Mm-hmm.
posters, you look at the first early Star Wars posters versus a recent one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hand painted thing versus a cut up
Yes.
computer um, collage that's blue,
Pastiche. Yeah.
that's blue and red. And the thing is, nothing against digital art. I love digital art. I'm a huge advocate for it. I use it all the time. I can't paint a picture, but my point is that um, things have lost their kind of just like appeal of like, come look at me. When you walk through a
Intrinsic uniqueness of
yeah,
because the reds the painter would mix there and use in his pens would be different from the reds the other painter would mix up
yeah,
and use on their pens. And
and
the
just
reds
more
you pick
decision.
on Photoshop is the same fucking red for everyone
Exactly.
in
or
kind
or
of
it's
a way,
just that there's less I was talking about mistakes and how they can lead you when you're
Yes,
painting
yes.
something, or not even painting, but if you look
Mistakes
at
define our voice,
yeah,
our
like old
style.
old advertisements or digital things that weren't painting, they were often layered photography, right? Like people would actually like title cards on movies. People would
Hmm.
hand paint those and cut them out and layer them and film them. You take something like the movie John Carpenter's The Thing. If anyone can remember, in the intro, there's the title that says The Thing, and it has a really unique look. The way they did that was by having like filming it was like a big card that they physically cut out the words, and then behind it there was a fire, and you could see that lighting through it, but it looked like light
Yeah.
projecting through, and it burned and it melted, and there was only one chance to do it, and it was what it was, and it was organic. Whereas now someone would open up After Effects or Premiere and type in the thing,
Mm-hmm.
pick a font, and if it doesn't look good, you just change the automation. And it's
Yeah.
which is fine, but it doesn't allow for those little organic
Discovery. Yeah.
miracles, discovery, right?
Curiosity. Yeah.
And I guess
Accidents. Happy
I,
accidents.
I guess leading back to where we got to this question is inspiration. Is that I find I draw a lot of inspiration from old media, be it books, magazines, movies,
Mm-hmm.
posters, whatever. I just love looking into that and just like seeing the magic in those
Yeah.
early works. You know, you look at early Dungeons and Dragons artwork or early Warhammer artwork, it's pretty terrible. Like some of the line drawing is not that good. Like it's
There's
just
some incredible too, although.
there is,
Yeah.
but like I'm just saying that there's a lot
Yeah.
that are technically not good,
Yeah.
but they're so awe-inspiring, right?
Yeah.
Because the thing is, the person who did it, when they wanted
These
to
have
draw
this
this beholder,
wonderful weirdness to it.
yeah,
They are amateurish, but they are made with passion, and in
they had
humanity.
more passion than skill, right? And
Yeah.
I think that passion, like an imagination, is always more important than skill. And there was a time when people were free to kind of run wild, and you could actually just do that.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, though, I think that it's not even so much that we don't have a place for it. I just think that technology has made creativity very approachable. And, I appreciate that as an artist because, like I said, I'm not skilled at a lot of things, but there's a lot of tools now that make things uh, automatically easily hit a certain level of quality. And it kind of loses that magic of fumbling through
Yeah.
your ideas. I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's getting dangerously close to suppressing our creativity, and we just hand it over to a machine to run
Yeah.
patterns. As you're saying, like the homogenization of culture, of media. The AI thing it's something really scary me, really scary for me. You talk about human elements, and imagine this becoming so
Yeah.
prevalent that we're just repeat, because it is what it's repetition of patterns.
Yeah.
They
And
they can look great, but there is no discovery. There is
yeah,
no,
I think there
you
can
know.
be. The thing is, like AI as a whole, very touchy topic. And I think based on what I've said, it probably implies that I would not like AI art, but I actually love that technology. I love using it. I think it's really interesting. The problem is that I think the vast majority of people using it are using it in a really lazy, incorrect way. Like I really just see it as another tool. But what happens is that, like you said, it's patterns. So uh, AI studies its source material, whether it's ethical or not, it doesn't matter. Whatever model they've used, they've studied it, and then prompts output a certain thing. And then it becomes cyclical. And if it hits a point where there's no human new stuff being fed into it, it's only referencing itself. And what happens after a time when these patterns only have itself to recognize, right? So I think that's a big problem with it. But I think that like AI art, like anything else, people can use it in a very human way. You can have a very artistic experience with AI when you blend it with your own human touch. But I think that comes down to the person and the artist. Like I have seen more bad AI artwork than I care to remember. Like there's so much of it, but some of the greatest artwork I've seen in the past year has been AI based. And it again just comes down to the person using the tools, I think.
Yeah, for me the ethical part is a big thing too,
Yeah.
and yeah,
That's a whole
mm,
tricky subject and it's
yeah,
complicated. And I think that unfortunately, end users don't necessarily have access to the right information to make informed decisions when using AI because there's uh, so many different companies and programs using it. You don't know how they source stuff. Some is more ethical
yeah.
than others, right?
And that's
But
that's the point. Like it's the way it's being done right now, I think it's damaging.
Yeah.
It can be done correctly. I even think sometimes a company maybe could have a team of artists that would feed it with a specific kind of art producers for that, instead
Yeah.
of stealing for people that have not given authorization.
Or
There's
or, or
many
the
different things they could done. They
at the
could
very
do.
least, I don't know that, having a pool of your own artists to do that might be limiting, but at the very least, getting permission, like letting artists opt in or out, because I know there are a lot of well-established, very skilled artists who love that their work is being used as source material and use it themselves. But the thing is,
And there
for
are
the
a
ones
lot that don't too.
and they didn't
Yeah.
have the chance to opt out, right? So I think
Yeah.
if people were given the chance to opt in, there would be more than enough volunteers to work with, and then the people that have a problem with it, they can move on and not worry about it. For me, one of the issues, the biggest thing was that, like, I was a very, very early adopter of AI. I was in the beta testing of Midjourney when there was
I did it too. I did it too. Yeah.
less than 1,000 people.
Well, not
And
not that many. I used it in the
yeah,
beginning. Yeah.
it
Like,
was like, before it was a discussion, I was playing with it and it was fascinating, and I loved it, but there was absolutely no talk of the source material or the ethics. Like, you
mm-hmm.
had no idea,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is, for me, was a little bit troubling and disappointing, because it's like, I've discovered this technology that was really useful and great, and I liked it, and I still am an advocate for it despite what some people might think. But I definitely felt really deceived afterwards by it, and being like, well, I invested a lot of energy and time and interest into something that I didn't realize had these ethical conundrums attached to it, because those obviously weren't presented
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in beta testing until people
Mm-hmm.
made it a thing. So I think that we need to give it some time, and there's going to be companies that are forced to, like, AI is not stopping, right? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
But I
The end
think
of the
that,
world is coming.
yeah, but I think that companies are going to be forced, and engineers are going to be forced to develop these systems a little bit differently if they want them to be widely
Yeah.
accepted by artists, and find more ethical ways to do that. Then again, at the end of the day, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, and nothing we own or use is ethical. The coffee we drink, everything, somebody is being abused or mistreated or not getting their
That's true.
dues for the work.
But
So it's
it
not that,
can go a lot and can go a little. So
like, it's not
that's
to say
not
because
also
so
a
much
cop
is
out for
wrong.
everything too.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't just say, oh, well, it's bad for everything, so this is an excuse that this is bad. But I do think that it is important for people to remember, if they really get very passionate about the ethics of AI, to realize that those ethical conundrums are present in all of the things they've consumed their entire lives. It's just that AI is a new one.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. But affecting people you see every day, and then having artists having pieces they never done being attributed to them because of
Yeah.
fucking AI copy their arts. Like, who my work is not my work anymore. It's
I
like,
think
fuck
for
you,
for
AI.
for
You
me
know?
personally, I think that a lot of the AI ethical dilemmas would be resolved if they removed the ability to make prompts that said, in the style of, and insert any known artist. Like,
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing. Like, I like the idea. For me, the idea of a computer making art is
It won't
amazing.
it
Like,
won't it won't work because it's all it takes is someone take that away from a program and make
sure,
their own thing and take it away. Like,
yeah,
that's the thing. Like, we can't control this. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like guns. Like, oh, guns. We just use responsibly or something. I don't know. It's if you give access to guns, people are gonna shoot each other. It doesn't say, oh, oh, we have forbid them to shoot each other. It doesn't work that way. They're gonna do it. You know. It's like
yeah.
some things in technology are like, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on.
That's a
It's
big topic.
yeah, yeah. Because for me, it's kind of the human elements you talked about. When in AI, we give up a lot of that human decisions to the intentionality of the human's decision. We're giving it to someone else, to something else, and even someone else, and it's like
Yeah,
when
I do worry about people uh, with AI because of its issues, kind of condemning it completely and sort of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. And I think that AI has a lot of positives that can be used. Like for example, like a way that I've used it is so going back to these block print stamps.
mm-hmm.
Um, I am not a great illustrator in terms of like form and perspective. So I can do something like I can take AI and prompt it to make me an image of a skeleton holding a sword, and it gives me that, and then I can then take that image and then I can trace it in my own style, and then I can print that out, and then I can apply it to linoleum, and then I can hand carve it and then stamp it, and it's like, is that AI
Well,
art?
Google can do it too. Like you don't need AI. Just scan it with a sword. Google will give you thousands, and you don't
Yeah,
have to use
but then
AI. Like
but at the same time,
Pinterest.
but at
And
which is more ethical, tracing the skeleton holding a sword that someone else made, or the one that the computer made based on,
no,
at the end of the day, you're still,
you don't need to trace. You make it your own. Right? You could see
yeah.
inspirations for very artists. I don't know.
And I think that's where I get a little touchy with AI, is that people think of it as only being one thing. They think of it as being these, enter a prompt, spits out a image, someone posts that image, done, lazy artwork. It's like, no, that's just lazy artwork. Um, but it's just a tool. Like,
Which is mostly being used for. Like
yeah, I
it's
think that's just what it's being supposed to.
85% of the work being done with AI is that.
Well, I think that it depends how you're looking. If you think about something like Photoshop, I mean, people are using AI constantly when they're using Photoshop. You do a select and generative fill, that's AI. It's no different than the other things. The difference is that you're probably using it on a piece of art that you created yourself, and it's only one small part of it. So I don't know. I just personally, I think AI is not the problem. I think that a lot of these image generating platforms are the
Yeah.
the problem.
I think it's when you give up the main decisions about the creative work to a thing and not to a human. That's where
Mhm.
the issue is the intentionality when you just that's the thing, like the main elements are not made. It's not was not made a decision by a human. Was like, oh,
Yeah.
they come up with that, and that's it. Like if it's only something to execute something you created, then maybe that's a better, I don't know, way. I don't know. And then like as a tool, as you said, like not the
Yeah.
final thing. Yeah.
Exactly. As a tool.
Yeah. Uh, you recently worked on your game, the Idol of Torment, right?
Yeah.
And it's a skirmish game that brings a lot of RPG elements, as you talked about in your videos. And I'm curious about what is your favorite weird thing about that game
My favorite
that you could talk about.
weird thing about the game.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I really like about the game is that when you look at it, the players are technically playing as the adversaries. You're not the heroes.
Oh.
The human souls are your objectives. You're the quote unquote bad guys in this game. Uh,
And
and
who controls the humans? It's like the
well, funny you should
referee.
ask. AI actually does technically, but a very archaic form of AI, which is like a simple rule set and a deck of cards.
Mm-hmm.
So they're called the Lost, and they are these human souls that are existing in this afterlife, which is the remnants of heaven and hell, which collapse on themselves. And they're kind of they've lost all their human memories and everything. They're just like base level core human souls. They're wandering around, and the way they move, there's rules for it at the start of every round. You flip a card, and it'll have, for example, a number on it, and that's the distance they move. But then there's basically like a flow chart of deciding, well, what direction do they move? So your models, what you're playing as, are called the idols, and they're these monstrous entities that
Hmm.
are going into this realm to reap these souls. And so the lost will move in a straight line directly away from the nearest one of these creatures. If there's two creatures nearby, is one yours and one uh, the other one your opponent, or two? There's all these different factors that figure out how it moves. But essentially, it's just you flip a card and it says how far these lost move or that they don't. There's a measurement, and you apply it to the chart and go from there. And you resolve that before the round starts. And it's a really unique mechanic, and it creates for very dynamic board states. Unlike a lot of war games, I think one of the things that I found unappealing as a primarily as, like, let's just say, like a RPG player, what I found unappealing about a lot of skirmish games or war games or battle games is that it was basically like I put all my guys on one side, you put all your guys on the other side, and we rush towards a thing and we fight.
Hmm.
Sure, maybe there's like objectives and things that are different, but it always seemed to be like a soccer match. It's just we each have a side and we rush to the middle. So, but when you take something like a classic D&D fight, it's very dynamic and three-dimensional, and people are moving around and doing different things, and maybe the environment is changing, and right. So that's kind of how our game operates, is that one, there's no player side on the board. Like when you deploy, you can deploy anywhere on the board. And I place a model, you
Hmm.
place a model, and in the first deployment, it creates basically this snapshot of a moment in this universe where these creatures and these souls are frozen where they are, and it's about to start. So it's really dynamic, but also it's really difficult tactically, because you can place things based on board state, but then the round starts and the card flips and you don't know what's going to happen. Those lost are going to move in a certain way, and that completely disrupts and changes the dynamic of the board state. So you have to instantly change your strategy, and you can try to manipulate this in placement and movement, but it's always this call and response sort of dynamic where, okay, I'm going to position myself here so that hopefully this lost moves there, but then my opponent moves it, positions their model somewhere, and it's this very liquid, um, fluid kind of state of affairs. And I think that's really weird and not typical of a skirmish game.
Yeah, and our players are in the collaborative game. They're working together against the humans, or is some kind of competition
No,
between their.
so
Oh,
so
they're
it's
disputing for the souls, right? Like who
yeah.
gets
So
the most souls.
it's a one versus one, and
Oh.
the objective is to collect as many of these souls as possible. And obviously, you end up fighting along the way. But
Mm-hmm.
unlike a standard sort of skirmish game, it's not I have an army, you have an army, we fight, one of us wins. You fight as much as you need to, but that's not your main goal. Your goal
Mm-hmm.
is to
Mm-hmm.
collect as many of these objectives, which are souls, as possible.
Yeah, yeah, great. And we talked a little bit before about maybe an area of culture of some interest that you draw ideas from. But I also love to ask maybe about another creator, another artist, maybe inspired you to approach your work the way you approach your work, or position yourself in the community the way you position yourself. And that artist doesn't necessarily has to be a creator in the tabletop gaming space. It could be like a musician, a
Mhm.
writer, an actor, anything like this.
Yeah,
Do you have anyone that you maybe try to model and learn from?
I mean, I think that it depends on the task I'm doing and because the inspiration for building a piece of terrain might be a different person than the inspiration for trying to edit and create an engaging video. I'll have a different inspiration for laying out my book or writing my rule set, or, like, do you know what I mean? It depends which aspect I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm always going, but there is, I would say that there's one person that I most kind of align with as just a general creator that I've always sort
Mm-hmm.
of taken as an inspiration, and that's Adam Savage from Tested, or people would know him from Mythbusters. And
Oh yeah.
he has a long history in special effects and television, doing different things, but he is the embodiment of just start doing things. One of his most famous things is one day builds, where he walks into a shop and says, I'm going to build a replica of this gun from Blade Runner. No plans, no nothing, and just starts doing it and has a day to do it and just does it till it's done. And he is not afraid of those mistakes. And like I said, I learned that from working in construction. He learned that from working in the film industry. You don't have time for that. It's like, we need this prop done today, so just do it. And yeah, I draw a lot of inspiration from him. He has a wonderful book, which I can't remember what it's called, but it's just about being a creative. And he's a very wise person, even just in simple things like how to organize your workspace or your tools. Like, he's the person that I learned a system that I live by in my life for organizing items, whether it be in my shop or just in my kitchen or house, which is first order retrieval, which is like, if you have a cabinet or a cupboard full of supplies, and you fill it with stuff, and I need item B, but item B is behind item A, and I have to move item A to get item B, 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to bother getting item B, and it will sit there forever and never get used. So first order of retrieval is just this idea that any tool you might need or material, you can grab it without having to move or grab something else first. And once you start organizing things in your life in that way, it's amazing how much of a difference that simple act makes. Because when you're in a creative space, especially, you can just grab for what you need as you need it, and there's no disruption or questioning, like in cleanup, like, where does this go? Everything has its place, and its place is somewhere you can grab it really easily. So that's something I learned from him.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that kind of applies even in the other way around, right? It's something you don't want to be using much or eating a lot, like sweets. Just
Mm-hmm.
hide that thing, man. Make it
Yeah.
hard to access.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's away from the eyes or something like this. It's
Exactly.
and something that you want to use more. You want to go exercise every morning. Leave your clothes ready to go by the door with your tennis shoes, and that will
Exactly.
help you
But if they're buried
get
at the
there.
back of the closet, you're
Yeah,
not gonna you're not
you're
gonna do
not
it.
gonna do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hello, wonderful weirdos. This is Diogo Nogueira again, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of my favorite games, a game that I created. And if you listen to the podcast, I love dinosaurs, and it's called Primal Quest. It is a weird stone and sorcery adventure game. It's a NSR game, which is this game that caters to the old school style of play, but has more modern and more cinematic gameplay adapted to our modern sensibilities. It has adventure with dinosaurs, ancient civilizations, spirity, sorcery, aliens, elder gods, and much, much more. It's very pulpy. It has, a complete rule set, a mini hex scroll, an adventure introductory adventure. You can find it at Exalted Funeral, itch.io, Drive-Thru RPG, and your best local game store. And we're releasing more and more stuff for it, so stay tuned and play Primal Quest. So let's get back to the weird with our chat. Amazing, yeah. And talking about your work now, and we talked about mistakes, about the human touch, and I want to ask you, do you think your work, your videos, your style, do you leave a voice, a weird mark in your work? And if you think you do, would you try to talk a little bit? What would that be?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure that I have like a specific weird voice in the hobby, but I think that's a hard thing for someone to define about themselves. I think that's something that other people have to.
Well, I mean, when we get older, we start thinking about this stuff, right? I
Yeah,
don't know. You
I'm
never
really
thought about that.
not in that way. Like, I definitely think about a legacy that I'm hopefully leaving. Mostly I just think about how strange it will be that when I eventually pass, there will be thousands and thousands of hours of my life just archived, but like only this very specific part of my life, right? And that's not a
Yeah.
accurate representation of a person, but there's so
Mm-hmm.
much of it that it becomes like, is that who I was? I don't know.
Oh.
Because I mean, that is like my channel, my videos is not the entirety of my life. It's not who I
Oh
am.
yeah.
It's a part of me, but there'll be a point where it's the only part that's left. And I guess I kind of think about that with everything I make, like make a game, make music, make art.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the part of you that's left eventually. And that's what's going to stand as kind of the monument to you. And at a certain point, that
Even
will
that's gonna go
that will be
away.
you. And that will eventually
Even
go
that.
away too,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not going to last forever, but let's
Yeah.
say for your children or your grandkids kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I think about
And
and how strange that is. Like I have a previous life as a musician. Before YouTube, I like released several albums and toured and all that. And I'm no longer that person. That's a totally different life for me now. And I have a 9-year-old daughter, and sometimes when she comes across it and she's like sees a video or listens to something, finds like in the back of the closet all the
yeah.
old CDs and records with me on it. Uh, it's so strange because it's not her dad, it's not me. It's like a totally different person. There's nothing like I don't know how it's very I
We
guess
we are several
philosophical.
persons at once, right? So we
Exactly.
play
Yeah.
various parts, and then
Yeah.
like this the thing like a person never crosses the same river twice
Yeah.
because this river isn't the same, and we are
Yeah.
the same too, right?
Exactly. But
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting thing to think about with output and art that you make. Although I don't think it's
Yeah.
something you should dwell on. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of an interesting shower thought, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's good, like reflection and solitude. It can bring something in your work too
Hmm.
to bring those things. I guess it's I really see the work, art as self expression. So if that's something you think about, how can you bring that into your work? I think it's
Hmm.
a healthy thing. And but you talked about something very interesting about who you are. When you are grown, that's is really how that Jeremy was Black Magic Craft. And now I want to ask you who Jeremy is, outside of all that, outside of the hobby, outside of crafting, outside of this. Who are you?
Well, I think one big thing is that despite having a YouTube channel where I'm kind of presenting myself to a lot of people, like really putting myself out in the open, the real Jeremy is an extreme introvert. I'm not super social. I can be when I need to be, but I am absolutely like a loner and not that social. So it's kind of strange that I became a public figure, we'll call it. It's that's
Yeah.
not really line, but who I am is I'm I think mainly I am a collector, and I mean that in a broad sense. Like that's what I do with my life is I collect things, be it movies, be it games, be it whatever. Like I've had so many collections over time, and even my own artwork, all the pieces I make, those are just to add to my collection. I guess like I've always felt this like desire to um I guess like archive things in a way and preserve things. I think that in some alternate timeline dimension that's very close to this one, I could see myself curating or owning some form of museum because I really love this idea of finding things and saving them from the fate of time and
Forgetfulness. Yeah.
preserving them.
Oblivion.
It's like
Yeah.
people like the VHS stuff is a good example. People wonder, well, why would you want this? Like you could just stream it, or you could just get the Blu-ray or whatever. And it's like, well, because it's different. The movie that exists on this physical magnetic tape is different than the one that's on the transfer of the Blu-ray. It looks different. It feels different. And if it's not for people like me, collectors who find these things and open them up and clean them and preserve them, they will be lost to time. And that's kind of sad to me. Like I like the idea of preserving this. Like that medium was such an important part of the 21st century, right? Like those medias like cassette tapes, audio records, VHS, whatever, touched so many people and inspired so much. And now it just doesn't really exist anymore. And I think that's kind of a shame. Like, I don't think we should regress and not change things, but I think it's important that there's always people kind of preserving a bit of that past. And I've always felt like
Yeah.
that person is me. Or at least that's what I tell myself to make me not feel like a hoarder.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with you. I mean, I'm a collector of role playing games too,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, and it's hard. And I love this phrase too. That's the only difference between a hoarder and a collector is money. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
but you know, yeah. I mean, I'm saving this up. This is all research. They said, oh, this is
Yeah,
all research
exactly.
material, and yeah. Yeah, but it is important. Things are gonna be lost, and people say, "Oh, don't dwell in the past." You know, always look in the future. But to be honest, you know, creativity, everything that needed to be said. I love this phrase. Everything that needed to be said has already been said.
Yep,
But since nobody was listening, it's worth saying it again. So we
yep,
can revisit these things and make new things based on that. You know,
exactly.
uh,
There's nothing new to create,
creativity,
really.
yeah,
There's just
creativity is only undetected plagiarism. You know, it's
exactly,
when you steal from one, it's plagiarism. But if you steal from 10, that's originality. That's
exactly.
creativity, right? So it's very important to seek these new things, and by doing that, by looking to the past, we kind of see the future too, right? And
Hmm.
it's that old saying that those who uh, don't study history are fated to repeat it, you know. And it's kind of has some similarity to this. You have
And
to,
like for better and for worse, right? Like,
yeah,
people always think of that as like the mistakes of the past and not wanting to repeat them, but also like I think it's important not to forget a lot of the great things from the past. Like if you're looking
oh yeah,
artistically, right? There's so much forgotten
to
art,
recover it, yeah,
to draw from again
yeah.
and to inspire and steal from, right? So
Yes,
of
yes.
course,
It's still like an artist. I love
yeah,
this book by Elsie Klein. So it's about that, you know, recover and bring it back and shed a new light to it. Because as you said, like our humanness, our imperfection will make us make some mistakes. And even though we are copying from these people in the past, we'll make something new and unique and in our own. And you know, a little bit weird because we'll
yeah,
color it with all, you know, our experience in the modern and contemporary world in a way.
yeah.
Uh, Jeremy, in your work, do you identify any possible strength or advantage that you have that may maybe have helped you in your craft, in your pursuit of art?
Yeah, I think that especially when I started out my channel and terrain building, my biggest strength was my background in construction. The one that allowed me, I guess that's what taught me my ability to picture things in a three-dimensional space in my head, right? Because whether I'm building, like a foam wizard's tower or I'm building someone's kitchen, you're still having to visualize this and break everything down into a series of steps and parts that um, kind of look like, I guess, like, when you look at like a mechanical diagram and you see the exploded parts diagram, that's kind of how I view a lot of things internally. And
Nice.
that's something that I learned as a skill as a carpenter that I've translated to my skill as a miniature artist. And then also my background in materials and tools that maybe aren't necessarily meant to be for the hobby, right? Like I have a comfort level with a lot of tools and materials that weren't getting used a lot in miniatures. So when I started, like it was just very natural for me to pick these things up because they're things that I'd worked with previously. And yeah, I think that background really gave me
Hmm.
a heads up, and sort of defined what my channel and my work was like in its early stages.
Very nice. And you know, you talked about this diagram and you see things, you can deconstruct them, and you know, it's I like to call that like an analytic eye in the sense when it's about ideas, because I have with this a lot. I watch a movie and I can dissect the plot and
Mhm.
stuff and mechanics in RPG, but with physical things, it's much harder for me. But you talk about doing that with construction and stuff. But do you have this kind of the same eye, the same analytic and this construction eyes when you're reading a book or studying a rule set or
No,
exploring a
that's
movie?
see, and that's where that's a short one of my shortcomings is that, like as a game master, like running sessions, that's where I always struggled was if I'm trying to think of like a world and an interwoven storyline and characters, uh, that's when these like clear visual pictures of physical things start to turn into hazy images in my brain. And I think that's probably why I turned towards making terrain and miniatures, is because it was something to kind of compensate for my shortcomings as a game master writing
Mm-hmm.
big stories. I was really good at creating a scene or a battle
Mm-hmm.
or an encounter, but trying to plug that into a larger web, I found very
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah.
So I would use terrain and props and images to kind of distract from what was missing, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's one of the reasons it's an important tool for game masters, because that's obviously
Yeah.
something a lot of people struggle with. But I did, and I also found that like sometimes the process of building those physical things uh, would allow my mind to kind of open up and go, oh, okay, I'm building this house, and what is it? It's an inn. Okay, I need a sign for the inn. Oh, what's this inn called? I need a sign. Oh, it's the Rusty Spoon. Why is it called the Rusty Spoon? Well, it's because this guy like, and it would lead me down a thought process of writing a character or a story that if
Yeah.
I was just sitting there going, okay, I need to create a tavern and who owns this tavern, it's like my brain can sometimes just shut
Yeah,
down.
it's the muscle memory we
It
talked
is, and
about,
it's
right?
exactly
Yeah.
it's creating those connection points, right? But if you just put me with a
Yeah.
blank pen and paper, I'm going to have a hard time coming up with this. But if I start building something, then the story is going to start writing.
Yeah, and it's kind of a meditation too, right? Because you're using your hands, you're in the moments there,
Yes.
using tools. Because sometimes you're just staring at a piece of paper, you're not present. You're only on
Yeah.
the ideas field, right? And it
Yeah.
can be very disengaging. But when you're looking at the thing, you're touching the thing, you're smelling the glue, you're with paints in your fingers. I don't know.
Yeah.
You might this you're engaging all the senses. You are there, you're present, and maybe that will help you uh, think better about this stuff
Well,
and the
I think also
creativity, right?
your main focus is the thing you're building, which means your main
Mm-hmm.
focus isn't coming up with a story, which means you remove the pressure of coming up with a story, and
Ah,
it can be allowed to just come up naturally, right? Which,
mm-hmm.
like, not everyone needs that, but I'm that kind of person that I can't just sit down and focus, and I have to be doing a task and then let the storytelling happen in the
Mm-hmm.
background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do a little bit of both, but there's always those moments that I'm like doing the dishes. There's nothing
Yeah,
to do with the idea, and like that pops up. Oh, I have to stop and go back and
yeah,
write it down. And it's
exactly.
it's always it's always something good. I can do. You want to have good ideas, people. Just go do the dishes. Go hang up your clothes to dry, or
Yeah.
do some menial task,
Or for me,
or some crafting, or do engage.
go go for a drive. I find that helps a lot when I
Oh
come
yeah,
up with like a lot of ideas when I'm just like stuck in traffic,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Daydreaming.
Yeah, daydreaming. That's my main sport in a
Yeah.
way. You talk about the strength, and you talked about some difficulty you have. Why that you focus on that strength. But I also want to ask you, in your craft, in your work, do you identify any kind of thing that you struggle with? Something you wanna would like to work more at and get better with?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for me, one of the things that I have been working on for the last couple of years more actively is simply my ability as a painter. When I started, it was kind of, I had no ability, and it was just get it done. It like just gray, simple, easy. But I have been focusing as I progress more and more on trying to be an actual competent like miniature painter, and that's like a never ending uh there's no ceiling on that. The level to which some people paint miniatures is so astonishingly absurd. Like there's people who are true masters. And I don't aspire to get to that point, but that was something that was like a shortcoming in the things that I made, and I've made a conscious effort to try and improve that over the past couple of years. And I've been seeing those gains for sure, but I will always consider that somewhat of a shortcoming. I have to always be working on.
Yeah, but it's also great when we take something we did recently and compare to something we
Hmm.
started making when we were beginning, right? We see like, wow, I've come a long way. Like I still wanna, we still wanna improve, but like it's good to see how we progress, right? And be grateful for where we are,
At the
right?
same time, too, I think like it's valuable to compare something you made now versus something you made 2 years, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and not necessarily just to say, "Well, look how far I've come." But sometimes when you come back to something that you made 5 years ago that you thought wasn't that great, and you look at it through a fresh set of eyes where you have no
Mm,
real connection or
distance,
need,
right?
you have some distance from it, you can go, huh, you know what? Actually, that was pretty good. I didn't realize that I pulled that off, or that I didn't really realize that this aspect of that thing was
Mm-hmm.
so well
Mm-hmm.
done because I was so busy worrying about how bad this other part of it
Yeah.
was. And that can be refreshing to come back to your current work on, to remind you
Yeah.
that you
It's
have
still
a
for
very
yourself too,
yeah, you have a really
right?
skewed view of what you're working on. It's very you can't see the forest from the trees as an artist sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and when you can't, it's good to remind yourself of that fact that, hey, you know what, um, I've been staring at this miniature for 10 hours and repainting this face 5 times, and it just looks like a mess. But remember that somebody who comes in and sees it for the first time might be like, oh wow, that looks great, because they don't see all the other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes know, buy art, for example, or do illustrations too, and people are asking, "Oh, do more art," and I find my art not that good, but people like it, and sometimes it's learning to accept and recognize some of the gains, and it's the self doubt thing is hard, and when you see this evolution, when you can compare, where you've grown and regain those things that you maybe have forgotten. You can grow even more.
Mhm.
So it's important to have a log, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. In now we know we're about an hour and 20 minutes in. I would like to ask you maybe about weirder experiences you have in your life that may have influence in your work and etc. And I usually begin by asking people about maybe their beliefs, in spirituality or religion or any kind of philosophy. Do you have anything like this uh, that might help guide you
Yeah.
in different moments?
So I think kind of strangely, so I am an atheist, but my game, Idols of Torment, is a biblical Judeo Christian game about heaven and hell actually literally existing.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know, I guess it is a very spiritual game in a way, and it's really strongly about the human spirit and our connection with the cosmos. Um, but it was like my lack of faith that really allowed me to, I guess, explore that without any without too much influence or expectation one way or the other. Felt free to just do whatever I wanted with it. And I don't know, like I guess other than that, like my belief system is, yeah, I'm an atheist, but I'm also just like a realist where I think that the universe is endless and huge, and we are fairly insignificant within it. And when we die, we return to stardust, and that's it. So I guess that's where as an artist, kind of back to the whole thing of like, when I'm gone, I'm gone. I'm just energy particles returning back to the universe. So the things I made are what's left there for me of me.
I
Yeah,
see,
I don't know.
and the major game, exploring this Christian Judaic, themes and mythology. And was that part of your upbringing? Did you grow up in religion and you left that, or
Um,
where did you study that to?
so
Was just culture in general?
you know what? Like, I guess family wise, I would say that in my home, religion wasn't a thing. But from my grandparents, like I come from like European grandparents who were still not super. They weren't like overtly religious, but religion was just part of their life, like the social life of church and stuff. But I actually came from like an Orthodox background growing up, and I still participate in some of those rituals and traditions. But for me, that's just a nostalgia family thing. But I never had anything really pushed on me one way or another. It wasn't really a conversation growing up, so I was left to kind of find my own way through it. I did accidentally get sent to Bible camp once when I was really young. So I had a friend who lived across the street, and he was going to summer camp. I was 7, 8 years old, and I wanted to go to camp with him. And I asked my mom, and she's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll sign you up," not realizing that it was a very very strongly like Bible camp oriented thing where you had to go to Bible study for like 2 hours a day, and they really pushed it. And I came home a Christian for a very short period of time because an 8-year-old kid is very easy to brainwash.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and that I think that really like played a lot on my psyche. And working through that, I came out of it fairly quickly and kind of gave my head a shake, and at a young age realized about religion or politics or whatever sort of belief systems that like how easily they can be imprinted on young people, and how wow, all of a sudden I felt this way and I believed these things for no reason other than because it was indoctrinated and people told me to.
yeah,
So I think after that experience, it made me very cautious as a person moving forward for the rest of my life, in like in terms of believing what people tell you, and making sure you take the time to really think about stuff, but also think about people's motives, and yeah, not too quickly fall into a trap of beliefs. Yeah, question everything and all that.
yeah. And I grew up Christian and then grew out of it. Not so briefly as you. Uh, But a lot of people talk about things they learn from it to help them navigate life. And life can be stressful. Life can be a struggle, and sometimes things you learn from that or from philosophy help you navigate it. Values, virtues, or maybe some paradigms. Do you have anything like this that maybe help you navigate life, not necessarily from religion, or maybe something you learned from your parents, or something you just studied, uh, that you go to when you're having a hard time, that you use as a resource, as a tool
Hmm.
to in the difficult
Um,
moments, or no?
I don't know. I guess I grew up in a like I had a pretty rough childhood, and was forced to take care of myself, basically, be self reliant. So like I guess I still in my day to day life approach problems like it's my problem and no one else is going to solve it, so I just have to fix it and get it done. And I find a strange sort of comfort in that. But at the same time, it's also made me realize
Can be
that like
lonely too, right?
yeah, but I also realized that no one can go at the world alone, and like it takes a village. So it's kind of this
Yeah,
strange like personal. It's I have
strange balance.
I have like an ethos of personal responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
but also understanding the importance of community and a team to like accomplish things. And maybe that's partially maybe a cultural thing. Being being Canadian, but also from a very particular part of Canada, from the prairies, where we have really extreme weather. I don't think people realize how extreme it can be. Where if you're, certain times of the year, if you leave your house and you're not properly prepared, you will die. Um, not so much
Wow.
now because infrastructure has come to a point where,
Hmm.
but like if you're ill prepared, yeah, like nature will take you out. If it's minus 40 degrees Celsius, like, and something happens and you're not prepared, you can be in a lot of trouble. And in this area, like for example, vehicles, they constantly will not start. Batteries die or whatever. So everybody grows up learning and knowing how to boost a vehicle. And if your battery ever dies in your vehicle, you know that basically the first person you meet will not only have the stuff to be able to help you, but they will help you without question. Because there's this weird, I think, survival sort of tribal instinct that exists in places with extreme weather, where you know that at the end of the day, you have to be able to rely on your neighbor for help in an emergency, which makes you become a person that can be depended on in an emergency. So it really teaches you the value of helping others and community. And I think that that's something that, I'm sure it exists in other places in the world for various reasons, but I only know my own experience. And it's a pretty strong one of understanding the importance of helping those around you, because it's almost like a survival thing of like, I have to, because I have to make sure that people will help me when I need it. So that's kind of made me be always try to be a valuable person in the community, which I guess like could also reflect to wider communities like tabletop. And that's why I've always tried to be like a positive advocate for what I do and for gaming. And I think there's like a natural course of action that some creators can take that's somewhat negative, and playing on negativity and just like sensationalism, clickbait, whatever. And I always try to
Yeah.
avoid that, and I always try to
Fitting
just
the
be,
algorithm. Yeah.
yeah, I always try to just be a positive force, like a friend that people can come to,
Yeah.
not feel
You know,
intimidated by, can learn something. And I try to help
and
people
build instead of
build.
destroy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of comes down to just like being a good neighbor, right? Like in day-to-day life, that I think, or at least hope, that that translates into my digital life as a content creator.
That's amazing and a great, life lesson. I don't know. And do you think the communities like this, living these situations, they are more integrated, they are more present to each other? Because there is this theory that, communities they are more integrated, everybody, has a place in the community. People live better, they live longer, have a better
Yeah,
quality of life than places where
absolutely.
people are more isolated.
Absolutely. I mean, I've traveled quite a bit, and I've experienced communities like cities, whatever, cultures that are very different from my own in terms of social responsibility. There's a lot of places where it's every man for themselves. You're walking down the street and everyone is in their own little bubble. And that's pretty foreign to me. Like where I'm from, it's still the kind of place where when you're at a four-way stop driving down the road, the drivers wave to each other, strangers just, say hi. You know that there's always someone else there that's friendly. Whereas, yeah, you go walk down the street of, be it New York or Berlin, in both those places, I've experienced like extreme culture shock from just feeling so alone in such a large group of people. Um, so yeah, I guess I forgot. I've kind of lost track of the question here now,
Yeah,
but
it's about the integration of community. If
yeah,
this place is the community really more united and people are more present to each other and they feel more connected, or it's just a survival thing. And my hope was that it really was more connected and
yeah,
you feel more parted. And you're saying it is, so
yeah. And I
which
think that it
is
is, and
great.
like I think like for my wife's experience. So my wife actually, she's not, well, she is technically Canadian now. As of recently, she got her citizenship, but she grew up in East Germany under communism, and so her upbringing and childhood was, very different than mine. But in some ways, it was very similar because people didn't have a lot, and they like really had to depend on each other, and they were a really strong community. And it's interesting because she was raised under very different circumstances, but has like very similar, i guess like
Values, ideas
ethos,
and
like
virtues.
ideas,
Yeah.
like, yeah, like inherent ways of how to be as a person are very similar to where I came from. So like I said, I like this sort of community uh, driven responsibility or whatever. I think it exists all over the place, just in some places more than others.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing those stories too. It's a great lesson. And talking now about other maybe beliefs, and we like to explore the world here. Like, do you have any experience or any belief in anything supernatural? Maybe like ghosts or aliens or
So
magic rituals, anything like
um,
this?
when I was young, up into my teenage years, I was very, we'll say, spiritual. And when I say spiritual, I don't mean religious. I mean paranormal spiritual. And I had lots of quite crazy experiences that I thought were really powerful. We'll say whatever. Um, Encountered different things, and then as I got older, not intentionally, but somewhere along the line, my mindset has changed into being a very rational person who like no longer really believes any of that stuff is real. And I think it's like, I knew that I wanted to believe in that stuff, so it did. And I think that the human mind is like incredibly powerful, and I think you can manifest a lot of different things. So those experiences were real in a sense because they were real and that I experienced them. But what they actually were, I'm not sure. But at the same time, I don't scoff at paranormal things. Like I love, like, my main content that I digest as a listener or viewer on YouTube is paranormal stories. Like my favorite YouTuber is Mr. Ballin. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he tells stories of the strange, dark, and mysterious. My favorite podcast is The Other World, which is just a guy that interviews. He's a skeptic who interviews people about their interesting
Wow.
supernatural experiences, and I love it. Like I love the whole idea of it. I don't know that I believe in it, but what I do believe in is a very large universe, and I believe in alternate dimensions. So I think that there is an infinite number of slightly different dimensions to our own that exist in parallel to each other. And if paranormal things actually happen and there is something beyond just the human brain imagining it in a very realistic way, I would personally attribute basically every weird thing in the world just to, maybe these parallel dimensions kind of crossing
Colliding.
paths for
Yeah.
moments in time. Like I don't believe in ghosts as in humans, as in spirits of people who actually existed, wandering this plane. I don't. However, I've seen some stuff that you know would make you believe that. But now later in
Can
life,
you
I
share? Can you share an
I, I, I
episode?
mean, uh, I one of my houses when I was in my early teens, I used to experience this young girl I would always see, who I would fall asleep and I'd wake up and she would be right beside me staring at me with glowing red eyes, and it was terrifying, and I saw her as clear as day. Now at that time I thought, oh well, she must be some kind of spirit or ghost, maybe there's some history here. uh, I still believe that I experienced that, but I don't think that it was anything supernatural in that sense, like a ghost. But I do think, well, it's like maybe it is some energy from another dimension that just like crossed momentarily and I happened to see it. I don't know. So yeah, I don't. I guess I don't believe in a lot of the traditional paranormal stuff, but I do believe that paranormal stuff. It obviously happens. People experience it, um, but at the same time, I also know that placebos work really well. And if people want to experience things, I think we have very powerful psyches, and we can manifest things that we want to see. So I think there's a lot of gray area there of believability, but I do think it's all interesting. I like hearing about it.
Yeah, it's that thing you said, right? Even though maybe that wasn't really true, but if something you experienced it, it's
It's
true.
true to you.
The experience is true, at least,
Exactly.
and it's true to you, and it's interesting. And I have this theory that creators and fantasy writers and RPG makers, and a lot of the people we ask here are all atheists. I'm atheist too, but I'm interested in this kind of spirituality and ghosts and stuff. And and I like to think that we don't believe in stuff, but we would like to believe. We would
I
like
want
it
to.
to be true. And it's
Yeah.
like, is that 1% of belief that helps us create the things we create with this kind of sense of
Yeah.
believability in a way,
And
right? And it's
uh,
this willingness to believe in that. I don't know.
you know what? This actually just like reminded me of something I'd completely forgotten about, which was when I was like a late teen, early 20s, and artistically, my focus was music, and I was like composing electronic music. I actually remember now that at that period in my life, there was like, um, there's no way to say this doesn't sound stupid, but like I always felt this presence that would be behind me over my shoulder as I was working. And it was like my weird spiritual muse that kind of like guided me through stuff. And I've forgotten about that, and I don't experience that anymore. And I have no idea what that really was. At the time, I liked to think it was some kind of spirit that was guiding me, who knows what. Now I
Yeah,
would say it was probably just like an internal psyche kind of thing, like something
yeah,
manifesting myself.
maybe. Yeah,
But either way,
you're
it's like,
also subconscious, maybe, or
yeah, it was my
yeah.
subconscious manifesting. Maybe it was like unmedicated mental illness. I don't know, but it was experienced, and it was uh, I don't know what it was, but I it was real to me at the time, and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and it's a lot of people talk about. I love this book about the creative way, by Rick Rubin, and it talks about the the shared consciousness and these ideas uh, that manifest in different people in different
yeah,
times, and it's kind of this. We managed to connect to this shared consciousness,
yeah,
and the creativity can go to whoever's more connected, right? As talks about these ideas that come from things outside of ourselves. And I don't know if it's true or not, but the idea is cool, right?
yeah.
And because sometimes we talk to different people from different parts of the world having very similar ideas, and it seems like this connection, through the shared consciousness that we can detect, like this very, very weird
You know,
supernatural
well,
Wi-Fi.
there's a lot of I think one of the arguments as quote unquote proof of certain paranormal things is that you can look at different cultures that are very segregated from the modern
Mm-hmm.
world, that are isolated, right? And how a lot of them historically have these same myths and
Mm-hmm.
legends. And it's like, well, that must be proof that these things are real. Like something like, say, Bigfoot or whatever. But the one that comes to my mind is that a lot of indigenous cultures across the world have,
The Great
uh,
Floods too.
well, yeah, but there's this there's so many cultures that believe that you should not whistle in the woods alone at night. This is something that's like all through indigenous cultures in North America, South America, Asia.
Mm.
It's a big thing, and I think that some people could attribute that to being, well, because there is some kind of supernatural beings that they've all experienced. But then again, maybe it's just that humanity's subconscious is so strong that it is interconnected in some way, that we have certain ideas and stuff that
Yeah.
cross paths across the
Yeah.
world, right? In the
Maybe.
same
Yeah.
way that like
For
two people
ancestors.
can write the
Mhm.
same story or the same song at the same time without having met each other. It happens, and Maybe it's
Yeah.
just mathematics. I don't know. Maybe it's just
Mhm.
law of averages. Who knows? But like
Yeah,
I
who
said,
knows?
it's like I don't necessarily like put a lot of validity into a lot of people's experiences and what they've said, but I really like the idea of it, and it's fun to listen to and hear about.
Yeah, for sure. You know, now talking, maybe asking other weird experience you might have had. Have you ever had any experience with deep states of meditation or maybe hypnosis or trance or out of body experiences? Anything very weird that made you see reality in a different
I,
way?
I mean, not so much anymore, but again, when I was younger, and I think a lot of these things come back to when you're younger because your mind is a lot more open and you have a lot less noise, right? Less
Yeah.
responsibilities and things going
Yeah,
on. So,
some
uh,
people's go out there seeking it as
yeah,
you get
but
older.
when I was younger, I definitely I experienced multiple times what I would think people would call astral projection in my sleep, where
Mm.
going to a different place, and it was so visceral and real that again, as an adult, I look back and go, oh, that was just like really my dream state was very
Mm.
visceral. But as at the time, like I really felt like I was like moving from
Yeah. And
place
have
to
you
place.
studied to that? Because people study this and write about this. Have
No,
you ever tried
yeah,
to
I haven't really
replicate it?
tried
Yeah.
to get into it, and I do think that like it can be done. Like I think that like lucid dreaming is something that people can
Yeah.
train themselves to do. Um, I'm not entirely sure I want to. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things too where you kind of I don't know. I sometimes you don't want to go too far into those kind of rabbit holes
Mm-hmm.
because they can kind of take
Yeah.
over.
You can get
And
lost. Yeah.
well, also because one of the other things that I used to experience, like in my young adulthood, was sleep paralysis. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a time in my life where I definitely would have told you that, you know, sleep paralysis demons were real because I've met
Yeah. I
them.
had those as a kid. Yeah.
But now I just think like that's just your
Mm-hmm.
brain talking to your body and in a sleep state and
Yes.
whatever. The but like I said, the experience at the time was very real.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it
I
actually was.
remember once that I spent the whole day telling jokes about dead people because, I don't know if you remember Ayrton Senna. It's like a Formula One pilot that was from Brazil. And like when he died, people made jokes very
Yeah.
quickly. And as a kid, I started making jokes about that. And like the same night that happened, I had a sleep paralysis. And I'm like,
It
fuck,
was him. It was
Ayrton
him.
Senna ghost came here
Yeah.
and like fucked with me because I
Yeah.
was telling all these jokes.
He's coming to take revenge.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, he's pissed, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
but now I know it's not. Like for a long time, I was like certain, like yeah,
Yeah.
I can't tell jokes about dead people or they will haunt me.
Exactly. Yeah. Uh,
And now talk about other now weird experience. Have you ever had any experience with altered states of awareness, either through deep states of meditation or maybe through use of psychedelics? And if you did, uh, have this experience made you have any realization or see things in
uh,
a new light?
not that I can consciously think of, like, not that I actively done or can remember
Okay.
offhand. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure. Yeah.
It's
No,
like I
that's
said, like some of these things, like even some of these quote unquote supernatural experiences, they're buried. You kind of forget about them, right?
yeah, yeah. But I mean, if you drop acid, you might remember
Y-
how it was.
Yeah,
You
that's
ate
true.
some
I mean,
mushrooms, and I don't know.
yeah, it's well, I haven't done mushrooms in about 20 years, so it's been a while.
Oh, but you had experience with this, and then did you? Was that impactful in any way in your life, or it's just fun
No, it was just,
times?
I think it was just a fun time.
Okay,
It was
sure.
just
Yeah,
a fun time.
yeah, yeah. And you talk about daydreaming and this night terrors and the things you saw. Do you still remember a lot of your dreams nowadays, or?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, cool.
But not throughout the day, but generally when I wake up in the morning, I have
Mm-hmm.
a pretty vivid like memory of my dreams. And it's usually multiple dreams. Like I'll remember like two or
Wow.
three throughout the night. And once in a while I have these very grand dreams, like very epic cinematic dreams that are different. Because I would say that the average dream you have is just kind of you experiencing something in life that's a
Yeah.
little bit weird or different. Like you're trying to put your pants
Mm-hmm.
on, but you can't find the pant hole, and someone's
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
for
And then your
these.
school.
Yeah, and they like my main nightmare is I realize, oh shit, I actually didn't graduate high school. I have to go back and finish high school. And then I get there and I
Yes.
go, oh, I don't remember what locker it was or what my locker combination is. And that is my recurring nightmare.
Yeah, I hate
Or
this one. Yeah.
the other one is I'll be driving and I realize, wait, I don't know how to drive. And then I'll like steer into a ditch. Right. So those are like normal dreams, I think, like where they're
Mm-hmm.
just um like real situations that are just slightly different. But once
Slightly
in a while,
weirder. Yeah.
yeah. But I sometimes have these dreams that I can only describe as cinematic dreams, where it's almost like I've dreamt something as grand and complicated as the Lord of the Rings movie
Wow.
trilogy in all this great detail. It's
Do
like
you take notes after that, or something like this?
no, because it's like those are the ones that when I wake up, they're so strong in my head, and I'm really like usually almost like pushed, like taken aback from it, like wow,
Mm-hmm.
that but they very rapidly fade because the
Mm,
concepts are so much more broad and
yeah.
abstract that it's harder for me to like. I can remember, oh, I had a dream where I forgot how to drive, but like these other dreams are so bizarre and grand that it's really like difficult to, it's like you're trying to grab clouds, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
just kind
yeah.
of disappears, and
Yeah.
it's like I retain memories of having them in like brief glimpses, but it's only like small pieces of the puzzle. Those are the ones that I wish, like if I could plug something in and just like record it, it would make for some wonderful movies.
Yeah, for sure. And then, Jeremy, we are almost done. Now we have just a few quick questions, or like kind of
Sure.
rapid fire, and just answer the first thing that comes to your mind. Is very whimsical questions, like if you could live in any fictional world, this weird universe that we play in, we read about, we watch movies, we read. Where would you choose to live, and who would you be
If I
in
could
that
live
world?
in a fictional world,
Yeah,
oh boy, that's really hard to think of on the spot. But
the first thing, like the
I
first
would
thing that comes.
I would probably want to live in the Star Wars universe. I think would be like the quick answer for me. Um,
And
yeah.
who would you be there? What kind of character
Uh,
would you be?
I mean, I think I would probably be an Obi-Wan Kenobi living alone in a hut on a weird planet somewhere.
Yeah. And the other way around, if you could take any thing from this weird fictional universe, whether for gaming, movies, whatever, and make that thing real in our own world, what would you choose and why? And that thing can be, a person, an entity, a faction, an object, a
You know,
power source, anything like this.
it would be a bag of holding, so I could just fill it up with all my collections and never run out of space.
Yeah, bag of holding. That's
Holding. Do you know
excellent.
that bag
Holding,
of
yeah,
holding
yeah,
from
yeah.
D&D?
The one
Yeah.
that you can put everything, but like a
Yeah,
black hole
it's
in
like a black
inside.
hole, and you just fill it with whatever you want, and you can just like jump
Yeah,
in there and disappear. And,
yeah.
yeah.
Shelves of holding.
Yeah,
Like
shelves of holding. Yeah.
I don't have place for my books anymore. I'm having hard time to put more shelves, and like this shelf you could call. Oh, I want my DCC book now, and
Yeah.
no, now I want my Traveler, and it just pops up. Yeah,
I mean,
shelves of holding.
realistically, it would probably be something like being able to teleport or whatever, right? Something more
Yeah, yeah.
useful. But the fun answer is for me is
Yeah, that's an
infinite
excellent
space.
answer. Much, much, much better than teleporting. It's so common. I don't know.
Yeah.
And if you could have any, that's where teleport comes in. If you could have any superpower,
Mm,
which
yeah.
superpower would you choose to have, and what would be the
I mean,
first thing you would do with that?
I've thought about this a lot, and for me, it would be teleporting because not only would it be like convenient and great, a lot of the, let's say, mischievous things you'd like to get away with various superpowers, teleporting can accomplish most of those things. Like a lot of things you could get away with if you're invisible, you could find ways to get away with it if you could teleport, or if you could. It's like I
Yeah,
don't need to fly if I can teleport. Like I don't
If you're
need
quick
to.
enough.
Yeah, it's like I don't need to be able to walk through walls if I can teleport. There's a lot you could. I think it would be a pretty useful.
You have to be more thoughtful though, right? Because
Sure.
you can teleport inside matter. That's very yeah.
Yeah, and I
Have to
guess
be more
like,
thoughtful.
it depends on the rules of the teleporting. Like, can I teleport into a bank vault and grab a bunch of money and teleport out with the money? Because that's what I'm picturing that you can do. But then you can also just like teleport away to some random destination. I like to travel, so that's kind of why I would mostly want to do it.
For sure. And our final question is: do you remember the last time you felt just really happy, grateful for being here and being alive? And if you do, can you share with us when was that and what was that you were doing?
There was recently I went to Adepticon, which is a big convention in the States for tabletop gaming, mostly like wargaming and stuff. And there was a moment where we were demoing some of our games just casually in like the hotel lobby. And I remember just taking a moment to sit back and look at just the people playing my game and all my friends and creators and stuff from around the world that were gathered there and just having a good time. And I that was like a really good moment for me. I was like, wow, like, all this work that I've done kind of like sort of just all came together in this one little moment in time. And it was a really nice experience.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to imagine we are doing this with these people, with this community, and it's always great to sit down for a moment and then be grateful for doing that. Because we're always wanting more things, right? But we sometimes forget to remember how we wanted to be where we are right now. So
exactly,
that's very important. Jeremy, can you tell the wonderful weirdos out there where they can find you and your work? I'm gonna put links on the show notes and everything, but you wanna.
Yeah, so obviously the YouTube channel is called Black Magic Craft. You can search for that, or blackmagiccraft.ca is the main website. And then for my game, you can go to idolsoftorment.com and check out the game that I released and created.
Yeah, go do that. Links on the show notes. Just look there, click it, and you're gonna get some awesome content. You're gonna learn from Jeremy. You're gonna check out this game. And Jeremy, do you have any last message for the wonderful weirdos out there that's still listening to us?
Sure. I'll give one piece of advice that I try to live by, and that is make something every single day. No matter how big, how small, make something.
Yeah, that's great advice. Can you take out saying the catchphrase of the show? Keep it weird, everybody.
Keep it weird, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Weird Games and Weirder People. If you'd like to keep up with the show, please subscribe to be notified when we release new episodes. If you'd like to support us, please leave a review or head on to code-fi.com/WGNWP. See you next time, and remember, weird is the new wonderful.